What was the best you have no power here moment you have ever seen? I worked in management at a theater for a while. If the concession counter was slammed and I was able, I'd leave my post and help them sling popcorn. One night while helping out, a particularly belligerent man started cussing out a 16-year-old girl on a cash register for being too slow, even suggesting she quit since she clearly couldn't handle pushing buttons or scooping popcorn. It was pretty disgusting and I felt so bad for the girl. I stepped in and told the guy that our employees have the right to refuse service to customers who harass them as part of our anti-harassment/discrimination policy, empathized that the lines were longer than usual, and suggested he should apologize and move on. He was pissed. Left half his order on the counter and started fuming off. Anticipating his next move, I went back to my original post that night, as manager of the customer service kiosk. Oh boy, the look on his face when he saw me. Didn't want a refund of his tickets though, so I assume he watched the movie, without popcorn. I worked for 8 years servicing communications equipment on site. 5 of those years were as the department manager. When oil was found in our area, we got so busy we could barely even think. Most of my team were pulling 12-plus-hour days 6 days a week and we were struggling to hire people quick enough. One day, the CEO texted and said he hired an assistant manager for me, which was something I desperately needed. I was dirty as hell from my previous job and swung by the store to pick him up and take him to one of our sites where he would be doing paperwork. The moment he got in the truck, he immediately started talking shit. He started telling me about how everything we were doing is fucked up and the department manager my name was a total moron and he would have my job within a few months. I just sat and mostly listened. He obviously didn't know shit about my industry and every time he would say something wrong, I would try to politely correct him and he'd either backtrack or insist that I was trained wrong. When we got to the site out in the middle of the West Texas desert, he complained about the layer of dust on everything and ordered me to clean up the entire site. When I sat down at my desk, the guy continued to bitch my ear off about everything that was wrong and chastised me for sitting down at my desk when he told me to clean up the site. So I called for a taxi, filled out a notice of termination, and handed it to him. He looked absolutely shocked. Then he defiantly protested that only CEO greater than could fire him. I said, "In my name, right?" He sheepishly nodded. So I stuck my hand out for a handshake and introduced myself. I can teach anyone how to service equipment, but I don't have a clue how to teach someone to not be an asshole. When I was in high school I worked at Popular Warehouse Club selling computers on the weekends. I was hired by the store manager via referral of a friend. I loved computers and they thought I'd make a good salesman, so my job was to stay in the computer department and sell computers, nothing else. Well, one of the shift managers didn't like that, and insisted that I needed to go fold clothes for a while. As in, half my damn shift. I told him that the store manager had instructed me never to leave the technology department, but he insisted. This went on for several weeks. The store manager showed up one weekend when both the power trip and shift manager and I were working. The store manager walks up with the shift manager close behind. Store manager slaps a stack of green bar paper, this was a while ago, down onto a shelf and points to some highlighted numbers. He looks at the shift manager and says, "Do you see this? This is our average technology sales numbers for the weeks you are on shift. See this number over here? This is our average technology sales numbers for weeks you are not. At this point, it would be more cost-effective for me to simply fire you. What do you think of that solution?" The guy stammers and stutters like a toddler caught bullying another kid on the playground. Fortunately, the dude wasn't fired, but the store manager made it clear that when I was on shift, I was not to leave the technology department unless I was on break or there was a fire in the store. That shift manager never said another word to me. When I was working customer service for a restaurant delivery service, not unlike DoorDash, I had a customer send in a complaint about hair in their food. The hair was sitting on top of the food. I checked their account, and they had one order on their account, which is a red flag. I checked their phone number and find multiple accounts, each other 1 to 2 orders, all of them complaining about hair in the food. I deny a refund because the customer has actually used the same identical photo for the last order since they ordered the same thing. The customer tries to argue with me, threatened to never use the service again, typical stuff that they always say. Eventually the customer gives up and ends the call, then immediately tries again. I get the support request. See who it is, then deny the refund again. She ends the call, then tries again. The person behind me gets the call. I tap the person on the shoulder and show them what I pulled up on my screen and that person denies the refund. The next day she calls back and tries again and is outside of the refund window, So the customer demands to speak to a supervisor. The supervisor bans her from the service for multiple fraudulent refund requests. My dad is 6 feet 3 inches. I'm 6 feet 10 inches. Sometime in my early teens, I shot past him. Dad was a yeller. Not doing what he thought I should be? No discussion, just yell. But I realized at some point that he wouldn't yell at me if he had to look up while he was doing it. I don't remember what our last argument was about, I just remember that I'd sort of caught on at this point. So I'm in my room in front of the computer, Dad comes in and starts yelling at me. I eventually stand up and start yelling back. Dad makes an excuse to leave. Dad comes back about a half hour later and starts yelling again, but at this point, it's all I can do to not just laugh. I know that the instant I stand up, the argument will end. It actually wound up being really good for our relationship, because Dad realized that he actually had to make valid points, rather than just going into former drill sergeant mode. Edit, obligatory this blew up etc. It looks like I unintentionally may have hit a raw nerve for a lot of people, for which I apologize. And I don't think that I had it anywhere near as bad as some of the people who replied. All I can say is that if you find yourself in a situation where you've got parents whose first response is intimidation or worse, look at how most people who responded eventually got out of the situation. Hang in there, it gets better, and you can find people who will help you if that's what is necessary. I had a rough childhood with a drug addict father. My mom struggled to make ends meet and my first job was paying for the mortgage. After several months of working, again at my first job, I finally had some money to spend on myself and decided to get a computer and a decent internet connection. At the time the best internet I could buy as part of a Dish combo package. I bought a Dish and brought it home to install on the house. During this time my dad was still living at home with us but he was hardly there and my parents had all but separated at that point. My dad promptly asked me what I was doing putting a Dish on his house. I let him know that I pay the mortgage now and I make the decisions on what we do with the house. I was young but it was a very empowering moment for me. Edit, I didn't expect to see all this when I checked Reddit again. I'll try to answer questions and things below. I like the jokes, probably a coping mechanism lol. Edit 2, I see a lot of people talking about the deed and wanted to say something about that. I'm not sure which of my parents' names were on the deed but what I did know is that if I didn't pay it, it was going to foreclosure. We already had warnings and it wasn't the first time that it happened. I was young when this all happened and probably didn't even know what a deed or title was at that time. If I stopped paying, we no longer had a house. A constant argument from parents to their kids is that they pay for the roof over your head so you'll do what they tell you. They rarely say I own the deed, you do what I tell you. 15 years ago, I worked for a company in Germany that was bought by a large US company. One of the first actions was a mandatory HR meeting. They used their US PowerPoint deck and guided us through the rules and regulations although directed by our local HR team to not do that. Here are some of the highlights. We are not allowed to accept tickets for the Super Bowl. Utterly confusion -90% of the people had never heard of the Super Bowl. A discussion about why we would want to watch that anyways, started. We are not allowed to have a relationship with anybody from a supplier or within the company. Uproar in the room. This is against the German constitution, what you do in your free time is none of their business. The discussion gets heated, everybody is discussing. The Americans on the line are very confused why. The head of QA finally gets up and shouts if I love that woman, nobody will prevent me from dating her. People sign the sheet that they participated and read and understood the presentation with reservations. People start discussing where to sign up for legal expenses insurance. HR refrained from that day from having mandatory global HR meetings. Management tried a couple of other stuff, at-will employment, against the law, everybody has a contract, cutting vacation, against the law, canceling bank holidays, against the law. Make people work on vacation days, guess what, against the law, and a couple more. It was a prime example of cultural ignorance and incredible funny. Edit. Wow, thank you for the awards and votes. One of my jobs is in a hotel/restaurant/bar. A guest came into the bar after having been refused service at our sister hotel down the road. He was very drunk and had been rude, abusive and threatening to the staff. He insisted we serve him as he was a guest, but we'd already been phoned by our sister hotel so they could let us know what the situation was. We refused, but offered him some water and suggested he go up to his room. He then went on about how he had nearly bought our hotel and that he was practically our boss so we should serve him or he'd have us fired. We refused. He told us he was a very rich man and would tip us hundreds of pounds if we served him. We refused. He was getting abusive at this point, so we again suggested he have some water and head up to his room. He went on to tell us that his brother was the mayor so we should serve him. We refused and told him he should go on up to his room yet again. He then said he was going to the pub across the street, but all the pubs/restaurants in our town have a barred from them all policy. We telephoned the other pubs to inform them of the situation. Many of them got back to us and said they had been offered money, been threatened with losing their jobs, and also told the story of the mayor. All of the pubs stuck to their guns and refused to serve him. Eventually, he came back to the hotel and went to his room. I already posted one more short one. I was about 12 years old, maybe younger. Often had been forced to stay with my mom's friends when she'd go out of town. The father was an abusive prick. He'd do things like make tomatoes every night for dinner knowing I absolutely hated them. For a week. Threw me in a pool when I was small and he knew I couldn't swim. Classic 70s macho man. He literally tortured me every chance he'd get. As an aside, if you're a kid and your own mother doesn't give a shit how people treat you, it's pretty much open season. Anyway, we went out to dinner one night. Me, my mom, her friends and their kids. We were leaving the restaurant. I don't remember what preceded it, but he said, "Go ahead, tough guy." Hit me as hard as you can right in the gut, thinking I wouldn't do it because I was scared of him. But this was my moment and I knew it. He was a small man, 5 feet 6 inches. I was at least as tall as him already. And as he gave me his shit-eating grin, I pulled my fist back and fucking belted him in the gut with every ounce of strength I could muster. He immediately doubled over. He was fucking pissed. He tried to turn it around on me, but his wife shut him up instantly. "You told him to do it. If you weren't ready, it's your fault, not his." One of the most satisfying moments of my life. And one of the last times I had to endure Mr. Tough Guy. Years ago when I worked security at a bar, we had a fill-in DJ for a regular DJ who was out sick. This DJ was known to not be able to handle his liquor, so our bartenders were told to not serve him. Well, of course some customers gave him some shots, and near the end of the night, about 30 minutes to close, he started getting mouthy on the mic and talking shit about how we wouldn't serve him. My manager came over to us and said, "Be prepared to throw him out. I have a CD ready to go." So about 5 minutes later, he threw our mic down and broke it and was using his headphones as a mic. Then he said, "And fuck security." At that point my fellow bouncer, who was about 6'2", 250 pounds, said, "That's IT." And stormed over there and grabbed the approximately 5 feet 10 inches 170 pounds DJ around the shoulders and neck and just straight yanked him out from behind the turntables. The turntables even made that nice needle screech too. He tossed him out the front door. The DJ then kept trying to come back and saying he needed his stuff. I told him he could get it when we say he can get it. He then started threatening me with my job cause he knows the owner. He did know the owner, but the owner liked me better cause I helped him out my second night there when a customer pulled a knife on him, lol. I just nodded and said, "Okay, go get him." He left and came back about 30 minutes after we closed. He walked in ahead of the owner with a smug look on his face, and the owner stepped towards us, then turned to the DJ and proceeded to scream at him about not disrespecting this bar and its workers and how he had no right to claim anything and act like he did. He ripped him up one side and down the other for a good minute or so. It looked like the DJ was about to cry. I would still see that same DJ around for years to come, and he still has an ego and tries to act like it never happened, but every time he's seen me he goes, "Oh hey, you worked at bar name?" I just reply, "Yeah, the one we threw you out of." I still don't like that guy to this day, lol.